What's up, podcast listeners? It's your host, Rafal Matuszewski, and today is an emotional day for me because I just moved, and I recently just went back to my old place to drop off and pick up a couple things, and seeing it empty really hit the heartstrings hard. Yeah. I don't know, if I keep talking about it, I'm going to start crying again. So let's get into the show, after my little spiel of emotions. What I want to talk about today is the importance of mobile toes. So random, I know. But the thing is, what I've noticed is when I teach my Kinstretch class every week, I always do toe intrinsics, and it's always interesting to see who has, control of their own toes, and a lot of times people don't. And the funny thing is, when I see people trying to move their toes and it's not, connecting with their brain, and the limb, whatever toe I'm telling them to lift up off the ground is not cooperating, they concentrate so hard thinking that it's going to happen, but it just doesn't happen. And it just kind of shocks me that something as simple as me asking you to lift your big toe off the ground without the rest of the toes coming off can be so challenging, and then people wonder why they may have knee pain, ankle pain, shin splints, flat feet, collapsed arches, plantar fasciitis, things like that. And when you really think about it, if you compare your feet to your hands, they're very, very, very similar. But the only difference, one difference is, and it's also similar if you really think about it, if you look at the structure of our hand/wrist, it consists of 27 bones. If you compare it to our feet/ankle, we got 26 bones in there, so they're very, very similar in that sense. And the only difference between your hands and feet is that your hands are exposed to, the daily environment all day long. And when you compare your feet to every single day use, it's covered in shoes, socks, heels, boots, whatever you wear. And when you don't expose your feet to the outside environment, just like any other muscle that you don't use, it goes into atrophy, meaning it gets weaker, it gets smaller, and usually bad things tend to happen. So that being said, if we don't challenge our feet daily, then they're not going to function the way a foot should function, if you really think about it. And a lot of times when, again, I'm not telling everyone right now to start walking barefoot everywhere you go. But you should challenge your feet as much as possible, or just simply walk around the house barefoot, something like that. So I've posted a lot about foot intrinsics. If you go on my YouTube page, there's a bunch of different little exercises you can do, and I tell patients and people to do this while you're brushing your teeth, for example. And it definitely helps quite a bit, and in the beginning it's going to be super frustrating if you're not really good at it. But think about it, if I ask people in my class to lift their big toe off the ground without the rest of them moving, or the rest of the toes moving, and they can't do it, I get a little bit worried, in the sense that every time you walk, you run, you lunge, anything that requires... Sorry guys, my video just cut out, and I didn't figure that out until I was almost done the podcast. So for those watching, you've quickly realized that it is nighttime, and I need to do the second half of this podcast. And guys, it was so freaking good. Like, I hate when my iPhone doesn't decide to cooperate. Anyway, where I left off is I was saying I get worried when the big toe does not move the way it should. And if I remember correctly, in my first video / podcast, I was saying that I am not an expert on feet and like that whole region, but I do understand what's required for a joint to move effectively. And a lot of times when people have their feet in shoes, man, it is super dark. I'm gonna try to lighten up when I edit this video. In shoes all day, in heels all day, it gets kind of crushed and it goes into that atrophy-like state because we're not challenging what our feet are meant to do, and they're supposed to, react to our environments. If you look back during a time where human beings walked the earth without any kind of shoes, they've had so much sensory information to constantly adapt to the ground. And now it's like you go barefoot on a sandy beach and like it hurts. But going back to the utilization of the big toe especially is when I see, and I've seen this a couple times with patients and clients, is when they've broken their big toe, and they obviously, most of the time, people don't do the proper rehab for it, and they end up really screwing up the mechanics of their feet to a point where they can start having pain in their ankles, their shins, their knees, their hips, their low back, all because of the toe. And I believe Leonardo da Vinci said, like, the most beautifully orchestrated and structured thing in the human body is the human foot because of its natural arch. Right? It gives us stability, it gives us strength. And when the big toe is not functioning the way it is, we ruin that perfect structure, and we can't utilize our foot the way it's designed, and then it goes up the chain and causes issues. Now, that being said, if we think about corrective exercise for feet, I've already mentioned earlier in my other video about those toe intrinsics, but the most simple one that a lot of people have tough time with is something called the short foot exercise, and this has been around forever. So if you look up a guy named Vladimir Yonda, he was way beyond his time when it came to corrective exercise, posture, movement, everything. He was a physiotherapist, I want to say back in the 50s, 60s, not entirely sure, but he was the one that I believe created the short foot exercise because he realized how vital the arch of the foot is, and it causes a lot of issues when it doesn't function. So if you think about having your foot flat onto the ground and your big toe is trying to pull in, like you're trying to like grab something, and you're doing that motion without the big knuckle thing that most people have a bunion on, without that lifting up off the ground. And a lot of people have that. So it's almost like you're pulling your big toe into that joint and back. And if you notice, if you're barefoot doing this, you'll see your arch contract the way it's supposed to. And that is so vital for so many things. Like, I always give this example. When you get someone doing a kettlebell swing, like a properly executed kettlebell swing, barefoot, at the top of the swing, every single time they snap their hips, you see their arch contract. And when you think about it, your glute, like in order for it to extend and activate, the big toe needs to have enough mobility to push off, and that is demonstrated beautifully in a run stride. Like a perfectly executed run stride, the big toe pushes off the ground to generate force. It's, like I said, the first thing that's required for propulsion. And when you put those things together, that creates proper glute function. So all those ladies out there, or dudes that are trying to get a heavy deadlift, if you don't have a fully functioning big toe, there is no point of you deadlifting or doing those cable kickback things, because your glute is not going to fire if it can't fully extend with the big toe. Like, it's all connected. Like, if you truly look and understand human anatomy, you'll understand that our body's connected as one unit. It's not just I'm doing a bicep curl. And I think I've said this a bunch of times on my podcast, and people still tend to forget, like, you can't isolate our body because it's one strand. Like, if you do a cadaver dissection, you'll see what I mean. It's all intertwined and connected. It's not like your anatomy textbook. So something as little as the big toe has so much influence on your body. And going back to my first comment in my previous video about asking my class to just lift up their big toe without the rest moving, and they can't do it, I'm like, holy shit, we got some issues. So a lot of times when people deal with pain, I look for those little things that people often forgot to kind of look at or pay attention to. And a lot of times it's like you fix that stuff up and it ends up clearing up other shit. Because it makes sense. Like, you know, if you have a leak in your ceiling and you're like, oh shit, water is pooling, I should probably fix that. You're not going to just patch up where the leak is. You're going to go to the direct source where the leak is. So it's above the drywall crap of your ceiling, right? But for some reason in the rehab and exercise world, it's like, my knee hurts. I'm going to treat my knee without looking at the top. Like, come on now. I don't know. I just look at training and exercise as such common sense, but people just go like, oh, I'm just gonna fucking work hard, sweat, I'm doing fucking 100 burpees, and yeah, but it's like, you know what? In order for you to do a fucking 100 burpees, your big toe needs to have the mobility to go into that flexion pattern. So, like, that's another thing. Like, how many exercises do you do that requires your big toe to function? A lot. Burpees, mountain climbers, push-ups, lunges, split squats, anything that forces the toe. Like, if you had a shitty big toe, doing a sled push is not going to be your favorite thing to do. People need to start thinking about indirect ways to influence their body, and this is one of the most overlooked things. And the funny thing is, like, when I get people in my Kinstretch class to work on toe mobility, they giggle to themselves because they're like, why can't I do this? Lame joke. If you don't use it, you lose it. Guys, that's it for me. Sorry about the video cutting. You guys are amazing. Sorry if I spoke about the same thing, because honestly I did not remember the entire first bit that I had, but hopefully that still gave you some sort of, you know, clarity on big toe mobility and how important our toes are compared to our hands. And thank you for the support. Hit the show notes, add me on Facebook and Instagram, because I post a lot of video and picture stuff. Sorry for being late with this podcast. Moving took it out of me this past weekend. Fucking 4 days of it. I love you guys. Until next time.